for many of us, the biggest thing missing from Demon is the ability to upload records in batches and automate our data entry, so we don't have to sit there and enter records one by one. A few years ago now, Joel Pick created a really amazing pipeline to be able to do this, and you can upload records one by one. And I've taken this system and updated it into my own version, which expands some of the usability of the system. So this is stored on a website called GitHub, and one of the main useful things here that you're going to want to use is this readme.file. And you can go through here, and it goes, and I've tried to write as thorough of a walkthrough as possible of how to set up and use this system. It's not very user friendly, it's not intuitive, and it has its issues. Hopefully this will all become obsolete in the near future when batch upload is added to Demon. But for now, this is the best way that certainly I've found for being able to do it. And in this little video, I'm just going to run through and show you how you would set up and run the system yourself. So your starting point is this GitHub page, and GitHub is just where we can store files and share code with other people. So I encourage you to read through this document, this README as well. But here, the first thing you want to do is go to this code button and download the contents of this Git repository as a zip file. And then you want to unzip that file so you have this folder on your computer of all the files you're going to need to be able to run this system. Then we can jump over into RStudio, and there's a few different programs we need to run this system. One of them is, or two of them are R and RStudio, and that's just it's a coding platform where we can run lines of code, essentially. So this is where we're going to run the system from. The other place that the other bit of software that we also need to have downloaded is something called Docker, and all the links to this are on the GitHub page. And I will jump over to Docker in a moment, but let's set up R first. So we need this R set as, so the working directory is set to that folder we just downloaded from GitHub. So to do that, there's lots of different ways to do this in R, but we're going to go to Session, Set Working Directory, and then Choose Directory. And then you can choose, for that will bring up a menu that you can then find the file that you want to be a working directory and set it as that file. So I've already set it, so it's immediately taking it to me, so to that folder that I have. So I have a folder with all the things that will be downloaded from the GitHub website. And in that folder, we want to, if we go to this Files tab in the bottom right-hand corner, we want to open up that DemOn AutoUploader.r file. We click on that, it brings up the script that we want to use. So we're now all set up in R, and we'll jump back to here in a moment. The other bit of software that we need to have downloaded is something called Docker, and you install Docker, and then once it's installed, get it running on your system, and it's going to look like something like this. This is just what Docker looks like when you first installed it and open it up, and you'll have no containers running. Thankfully, you don't have to worry too much about Docker. There's not much we have to do in here, but you need it running in the background, and we'll see it in action a bit later. So make sure you've got Docker downloaded and installed and running on your system. Once we're sure that's the case, we can jump back over into R, and then we want to get started setting things up so we can get some auto uploading of records. So we're going to go to this Terminal tab in the bottom left-hand corner, and in this Terminal tab we need to run a couple of lines of code, and you'll find those within that README file on GitHub. So there's these couple of files. This first line we'd have to run here, pull Selenium standalone Firefox. We don't have that. I don't need to run that right now because I've already run it. But if this is your first time, you'll need to run that. So you download a standalone version of Firefox onto your system that Selenium, this program, can use. And then the next stage is, once that is downloaded, which will take some time, you'll then want to run this next line, which just runs this standalone web browser in the background on your computer. So we'll copy this little line of code, and then we'll jump over into RStudio, and then in the terminal, we'll paste that in and we'll run that. So you paste it in, just press enter, and then it immediately asks you for your password. And this is the password to your computer. So I will enter my password. You'll notice that your password doesn't come up as you type. That's deliberate. But once you finish typing your password, press enter, and then the whole system, and there's going to be a lot of stages through this, is a little bit slow. So we just have to be patient with each step. There's a fair bit of setup in this system. So I already had this standalone Firefox downloaded, so this is just launched this within Docker. It's now running its own standalone web browser in the background. And if we jump over into Docker now, you'll see that it's changed what it looks like. So we now do have what's called a container running. So this little container here is running a web browser in the background, and we're going to use R to talk to Docker and tell it to use that web browser to enter some ringing data. So we'll go back over into R. We're finished in the terminal now, so we'll go back over to the console, and now we start with the code. When you first open up R, you've got in the top right hand corner, this is where all your files and stuff are stored, and all the objects. That's empty. So, but we want to start with a clean slate. So if it's not empty, this little first line will empty that top right hand environment. And in case you're relatively new to R, when we run R, we just click on a line that we want to run, and we'll see that our flashing line indicator, and then it's on the line, and then you can either click run, or you can press Command Enter or Control Enter, depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC. Then we need to make sure we have a package called rselenium installed and running. So line 8 will load up that package for us. We've already set our working directory. That's what we did in our first step. So now we need to import the data that we want to upload to Daemon. And this is a good time to go to a tangent and just talk about that data for a moment. So we're now over in Excel, and this is the data we're going to upload to Daemon as a batch automated upload. And it's a very specific format that we have to follow. The order of these columns doesn't matter. So you can switch these columns around as much as you like, but the names of the columns have to stay the same. They have to be exactly what they're called here. Spelling, capitals, all that sort of thing. They cannot change. What's also important is the format of this date and time. You'll notice the time is when you click on the cell in the top bar up here, you'll notice there's a very distinct format to that time. And it has to be in that format. If it's slightly different, it will break the system. So if you need to input your own data, I recommend opening up this file and adding your data onto it, and then deleting these records that are in here. Just so you can ensure the format is consistent with this format that I've given you. Everything else also has to match how you would enter it on Daemon. So for example, FAT scores have to be B2 or B3 rather than just 2 or 3. And then your location names have to be exactly what they're called in Daemon, so that when we send that data to Daemon, it knows the data that it has to use. So that's the data we're going to read in. So we'll run line 14 and we'll bring in this ringing upload template. It gives us a warning message, but don't worry too much about that. The data is actually fine. And then we can just have a quick look at that data. So line 15 and 16 just allows us to look at, just to make sure the data looks how we expected it to look. And then line 19 says what this line is doing is it's pulling in a load of functions that I've written and are stored in a separate file. So you see when I run that, I get a load of functions come up in the top right. And all these are stored within the DemOn AutoUploader functions file. This line 19 will only work if you've set your working directory to the folder which contains that functions script. So we have all our functions to be able to do all the data wrangling that we need, or data upload that we need to do. Now we need to run a remote drive and open it. And this is a slow step. So this step here, what I'm basically telling R, it's actually been quite quick for me, thankfully. So it's speaking to that Docker. It's getting R to speak to Docker and feed into that browser that we've opened up in the background. And then this open line has just opened up that browser. And what you should get is something that looks like a load of text, load of different elements after you run that open line. If you get a huge big block of continuous text, it's probably not worked. And this step, this remdr open step, is the step which produces issues fairly often. And there's some troubleshooting on the GitHub page at the bottom, just of some of the common issues that can arise. If anything does go wrong, my recommendation is just to go back, repeat, and try and just go back to the start. Restart R if you have to, and try again. But once we've got that, once it looks like it's run properly, and it will look something like this, we then can open up the BTO web page. So line 26, we run that. And again, each step may be slightly slow, so just be patient with each line. In the bottom right-hand corner, once that's run, it's given us a screenshot of that web browser that we've opened up in Docker. So we're now on the BTO web page, and then we can log in. So we need to log in. So we need to give the system our username and password. And what you want to do is replace these ... with your password. So I can type in my login for BTO, and I'm obviously not going to type in my password. I've got it hidden as a hidden object, so I'm just going to put that. But you would type in your password in text. So if your password was, for example, 12345, you would type it in like that. Hopefully that's not your password, but that's how you would type it in. But I've got mine as a hidden object called password. So I can now log in to the website, and you can see that the screenshot's now updated. So this is a screenshot, so I can click down here, nothing happens. I can't do anything within this window. This is just a screenshot of what that remote browser in the background looks like. Next, we want to navigate to the ringing entry page. So that's what the next function does. That will take us into that data entry page. So as you see, we just have to be a little bit patient at each stage. Up till now, the system looks identical to what Joel created in his version. But the first change is within this ringing page function. And now, when it takes you to the ringing page data entry, it changes your settings so that the data entry format is the all base capture field set up for export. And what that means is you have lots of different data entry fields. And it means that with this updated version, we can upload a lot more fields of data that are available to us. I haven't programmed for every single field, so if you want fields added, get in contact. Once we're here, we can then start uploading our data. So we've uploaded, we've got this BTO data file. We're going to try and add in three different ringing records. So we're going to upload, we're going to do the BTO ringing upload because it's ringing data type, which is record types N and S. We can upload here, and we're going to run the BTO ringing upload function on that object. And then there's a couple of arguments we can add into that function. Display equals true is the default, and we'll see that in a moment. For by default, every time you submit a record, it will show you a screenshot of what Daemon looks like after you've hit submit. And that's really useful for if an error message occurs. So for example, if you try and submit a record where the wing is outside the range that Daemon is expecting, it will throw a warning message, and this system will then not submit that record. So you'll have to go back and do that record by hand. But as long as you don't get any warning or error messages, then it will be submitted onto your daemon. The other argument that we can have in is row start, and that's new for my version of this system. And this just allows you to choose at what row of your data do you want to start entering. And by default, it starts at the first record. And this can be quite useful when you're doing very large data sets, which may fail at some point through it. So maybe you've got 500 records you're going to submit in a batch, and your computer goes to sleep or something after 300 because of the time it takes. And then the system logs you out. And if that happens, then you'll have to, it will throw an error, but those up to the 300 that you did will be in daemon, so you don't want to restart from the first record. You can choose to the row you want to start at to be row 301, and then it will keep going from there. So we can run that BTO ringing upload function, and again, for each record it's relatively slow, although compared to entering it ourselves, maybe it's not too slow, particularly with large data sets. So our first record, we've got a validation warning. This was a blackbird, and the wing length wasn't long enough. It was throwing an error. This is just made up data, so of course this is going to be the case. And then the second record also was throwing a validation warning. And both of those records, because of these validation warnings, will not be entered into daemon. And then you can see this little bit of orange text at the bottom was changing, it was updating, so it was saying 1 record submitted, then 2, then 3, and then on the third record submitted, well, this is our final screenshot, you can see it actually said record saved, so this is an indication that that third record was officially entered into daemon. And then now it's all on daemon, so we could go to our daemon page. So this is my daemon, and I can go to my notifications, and I've got a lot that need to go because I've just done a massive batch of sightings which I was behind on, and I can look for new records, or I can look for a retrap that I know got entered there. So I know there was a great hit, so we just uploaded this retrap great hit record from that spreadsheet. But there was a couple of blackbirds we tried to enter, so are there any blackbirds here? No, they weren't uploaded at all. And what we can do is we can, you can go to onto Daemon. So when you've done a batch upload, you go onto your Daemon and you'll have a notification. And depending on your record controller level will be the sort of notifications you'll get. But you'll get that there's records ready. If you aren't a record controller, it will tell you that you have records that are ready, that you can set to be ready for your record controller to check. If you're a record controller, it will tell you that there's records that that can be submitted. So you can view those records. So we can go onto a view of all our records that we've got waiting for us, what the batch upload has done, and then we can export those records. So you can export all the data, you can give it a name, whatever you want to call it, and then you can go back over into R, and we can then run this bottom section where we can import that file, and then you can compare the records that are on Daemon to what you tried to upload, and then it will pull out those records that didn't get uploaded, so you can see which of the records failed from your list, and then you can go through correcting any mistakes in there. So if I did this bottom stage here, it would pull out those 2 blackbirds which didn't have correct wing lengths, and I could try and work out what was wrong with those and change the wing lengths. And then once I've adapted that data or made any changes I needed to do, I can then run the ringing upload function again, but on that new limited data set for those records that weren't uploaded. So the system is a little bit clunky, it's complicated, but once you get it up and running and working, it's very efficient. Today, as you just saw on my Daemon, embarrassingly, I submitted about 1,000 sightings records from my Mutes One project, which I was very much behind on. But so it's this system, when you've got backlogs or you're doing this regularly, this can save you a lot of time, and hopefully, like as I said earlier, it will become obsolete in the near future anyway. So thank you for listening, and I hope that this video has gone some way to being helpful to you.